Tonight, before you drift into sleep, try to imagine that somewhere beyond the familiar sky of Earth, there exist worlds so strange that the human mind hardly knows whether to call them planets or ancient dreams of the universe itself. There are places where rain does not fall as water, but as molten metal. There are oceans, not made of calm blue seas, but of crimson lava glowing like burning fractures inside the heart of a star. And there are lonely planets wandering through eternal darkness, with no sun to rise in the morning. Stranger still is the fact that these worlds truly exist. Carl Gustav Jung once said, "Human beings do not live only in the material world, but also in a world of symbols, shadows, and the unknown." Perhaps that is why we have always been drawn to the night sky, not only because of the stars, but because of the feeling that somewhere within that darkness, there are things far beyond the familiar patterns of the mind. For thousands of years, humanity believed that our solar system was the standard model of the universe. Small rocky planets close to their star, giant gas planets farther away. Everything appeared orderly, stable, and understandable. But then modern telescopes began to look farther, and the universe completely shattered our imagination. Astronomers discovered planets with skies filled with burning iron vapor, worlds where one half remains trapped in eternal daylight, while the other never witnesses a sunrise. Planets so light that if there were an ocean large enough, they might float like cotton candy through space. And even worlds born from the ashes of dead stars. The more we explore, the more the universe begins to resemble a dream rather than a machine. And perhaps what makes these strange planets so fascinating is not only science, but because they reflect something very deep within the human soul: loneliness, mystery, fear of the unknown, and the quiet peace that comes from realizing we are only a very small part of an infinite ocean of existence. Welcome to Stories for Sleep, a place where we slowly wander through thoughtful and gentle journeys, exploring the universe, the human mind, and the softest mysteries of existence. If you enjoy stories that help the mind relax before sleep, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a small comment, or simply listen quietly beside me tonight. And now, allow your shoulders to soften, allow your breathing to slow, allow the light in your room to grow gentler, because in just a few moments, we will leave Earth behind. We will travel through storms of metal rain, oceans of lava, worlds without suns, and planets silently turning within the deep darkness of the cosmos. Tonight's journey has only just begun. The universe is stranger than we ever imagined. Night is often the moment when human beings become most honest with themselves. During the day, we are pulled away by work, noise, responsibilities, unfinished conversations, and countless scattered thoughts crowding the mind. But when night falls, when the room begins to quiet, when the light beyond the window slowly fades, the human mind often opens another hidden door in silence. It is the moment when we begin thinking about things greater than ourselves, about time, about existence, about the stars, and about the strange feeling that somewhere out there, worlds may exist completely unlike anything we have ever known. Carl Gustav Jung believed that beneath ordinary human consciousness lies a collective unconscious, an ocean of ancient symbols shared by us all. Perhaps that is why, since the earliest ages, humanity has looked upon the night sky with something close to reverence. We gaze at the stars, not only to find light, but to find ourselves. Because every distant star feels like a silent question, the universe whispers into the human soul. Are the things you know truly the whole truth? For most of human history, we believed our solar system was a nearly standard model of the universe. Small rocky planets near the Sunday giant, gaseous worlds farther away. Everything moved with order, simplicity, and logic. It was the kind of order that made humanity feel safe, because the human mind loves what is familiar. We want the world to make sense. We want the universe to behave like a predictable machine. We want to believe nature follows stable patterns, just as the sun always rises in the morning. But then, humanity began to look farther. Modern telescopes turned toward the deep darkness between the stars. And there, we discovered something both beautiful and humbling, beyond imagination. The universe is not simple. It is not merely larger than we once believed. It is far stranger. Perhaps the most astonishing thing about exoplanets, worlds orbiting distant stars, is not their number. Even though astronomers have already discovered thousands beyond our solar system, what truly leaves humanity speechless is their almost absurd diversity. Because out there exist worlds that, if described a few centuries ago, would have sounded like mythology. There are planets where metal falls from the sky like rain. Try imagining that for just a few seconds. A world where daytime temperatures are so extreme that iron can no longer remain solid. Metal evaporates into the atmosphere like seawater beneath sunlight. Then enormous winds carry that iron vapor toward the dark side of the planet, where temperatures are slightly cooler, just enough for the metal to condense and fall as glowing crimson rain. It sounds like an image from some ancient and impossible dream of humanity, but it is real. And strangely, when we hear about such worlds, we do not only feel astonishment, we feel drawn toward them. Jung believed the human mind is forever fascinated by the shadow, the unfamiliar, the chaotic, and the unexplained. Perhaps that is why these strange planets are impossible to ignore. They represent parts of the universe that reason has not yet fully tamed, a gentle reminder that reality is always larger than the models humanity creates to explain it. And then there are planets whose surfaces are not oceans of water, but oceans of lava. Imagine a glowing red horizon stretching endlessly beneath a black sky. No blue waves, no sandy shores, only seas of molten stone moving slowly like the blood of the planet itself. On such worlds, rock is no longer solid and dependable as it is on Earth. Mountains can melt, the ground can glow, and the air above is filled with burning mineral vapor. When we think about places like this, we begin to understand something deeply important. Even the things that seem most permanent in life are only temporary conditions. On Earth, we are accustomed to blue oceans, rainwater, solid ground, and gentle skies. We unconsciously believe these things define what a planet should be. But the universe does not agree. The universe has no obligation to resemble human imagination. And perhaps that is one of the most humbling lessons exoplanets offer us. They force us to abandon the belief that human experience stands at the center of everything. Because, beyond Earth, exist worlds that have never known blue oceans, never known sunrise, and perhaps never even known a sun at all. There are planets wandering alone through interstellar darkness, not orbiting any star, no morning light, no seasons, no familiar orbit, only darkness stretching across billions of years. The idea of rogue planets always carries a peculiar sadness. They feel like exiles cast away from the cosmic family. Some may once have belonged to distant star systems before chaotic gravity hurled them into deep space. A planet that once had a sun, once had daylight, once revolved around a familiar source of warmth, and then one day, it was thrown into eternal darkness. There is something painfully human in that image. Jung believed that the most powerful symbols always reflect our inner lives. And strangely, rogue planets resemble lonely souls drifting within the human psyche. The parts inside us that once belonged somewhere, but became separated. Old memories, forgotten emotions, loneliness without a name. Perhaps that is why, when we imagine a planet silently floating through darkness between the stars, we do not only feel sorrow for it, we also feel sorrow for ourselves. But the most beautiful part is this. Even within that darkness, some planets may still preserve warmth deep inside. Some scientists believe rogue planets could retain heat within their cores, Some may even hide liquid water beneath thick layers of ice. There is something almost poetic about that idea, that a world does not necessarily need a sun in order to avoid dying completely. Sometimes survival comes from a quiet fire within. And perhaps human beings are the same. There are periods in life when we feel lost within darkness, without direction, without light, without knowing where we belong. But perhaps, somewhere beneath all of it, the soul still carries a small hidden warmth, enough to continue existing. And still, the universe grows stranger. Out there are worlds orbiting two suns. For thousands of years, the image of twin suns existed only in myths and stories of fantasy. Yet humanity eventually discovered that binary star systems can truly hold stable planets. Imagine an evening on such a world. Two suns hanging in the sky, two shadows stretching across the ground, light constantly shifting as the stars move around one another. The sky there would never feel familiar in the way Earth's sky does. And somehow, that moves the soul. Because every time humanity discovers another strange planet, we are forced to expand our definition of what is normal. Perhaps Jung was right when he suggested true psychological growth begins the moment we step beyond the familiar boundaries of the ego. The universe is doing exactly that to us. It keeps breaking apart our old limitations. Every new exoplanet feels like a doorway opening into another version of reality. And astonishingly, the universe never seems to run out of ideas. There are planets lighter than foam, worlds darker than coal, places where winds move faster than sound, skies filled with vaporized rock. And slowly, humanity begins to understand. Our solar system is not the standard design of the universe. It is simply one among countless ways nature can create a world. That truth makes us feel both small and strangely free. Because if the universe can be this strange, perhaps human life does not need to remain trapped inside narrow definitions either. Perhaps there is not only one way to live, not only one kind of soul, not only one path meant for every human being. Every planet carries its own shape, its own climate, its own history. And so do we. Perhaps that is why stories about the cosmos move us in such quiet ways. Because when we look into those distant worlds, we are also looking into the mysterious depths within ourselves, a place larger than we imagined, more complicated than we imagined, and far stranger. Tonight, before sleep carries you away, perhaps the most beautiful thing is not how many planets humanity has discovered, but the fact that the universe still remains mysterious enough to make us lift our eyes toward the sky with the same wonder we felt in the beginning. Out there, within the endless darkness between the stars, there are still worlds no one has ever seen, oceans no one has touched, skies no one has stood beneath, storms of metal rain still falling silently after millions of years. And there is something gentle in knowing that, within a universe so vast, we still possess the ability to feel wonder. Worlds that never see dawn. Perhaps one of the deepest human experiences is waiting for dawn. For thousands of years, humanity has lived within the rhythm of light. We wake when the sun rises over the horizon. We work beneath the daylight sky and slowly begin to soften as evening shadows spread across the earth. In some quiet way, the whole of human civilization has been built upon the gentle alternation between light and darkness. Day and night became the oldest clock of the human mind. Dawn has always carried the feeling of beginnings. Sunset has always whispered of endings. Even human emotions often move with the light. We feel more hopeful in the morning, more reflective when night arrives. Our deepest memories often return when the light fades softly beyond the window. Carl Gustav Jung once believed that the human soul does not exist separately from nature. The rhythms of the outer world quietly shape the rhythms within us. Perhaps that is why the idea of a place where dawn never comes feels both beautiful and terrifying. Out there, within the deep darkness of the galaxy, Such planets truly exist, worlds where the sun never rises and never sets. They are called tidally locked planets, a strange phenomenon that occurs when a planet orbits very close to its star for immense spans of time. The powerful gravity slowly reduces the planet's rotation until it permanently shows only one face to its parent star. Much like the moon always shows the same face to Earth. But imagine that happening on the scale of an entire world. One half of the planet forever buried in light, the other half never seeing the sun again. No morning, no evening, no sky changing color between day and night. Only endless brightness and endless darkness. When people first hear about such planets, they often find them deeply unsettling, because the human mind is built upon change. We are creatures of rhythm, summer and winter, day and night, wakefulness and sleep, hope and loss. But on those tidally locked worlds, time no longer seems to flow in the way humanity understands it. If you lived on the side forever facing the sun, the sky would remain frozen in blinding light. The sun would never move. It would hang motionless in the heavens like a giant eye that never closes. And if you lived on the dark side, you would never witness a sunrise in your entire life. No light appearing at the horizon, no morning arriving to begin again, only endless night. There is something profoundly symbolic in that image. Jung once said that human beings live between two poles, consciousness and the unconscious, light and shadow. And strangely, these planets divide themselves in exactly the same way. One side burning with light, one side drowned in darkness, as though they are physical manifestations of the human soul itself. Because deep inside every person, there are regions untouched by light, forgotten memories, hidden fears, parts of ourselves we do not wish to face. Jung called this the shadow. He believed that no human being can truly understand themselves without finding the courage to enter those darker regions within. And perhaps that is why planets without dawn haunt us so deeply, because they reflect something ancient within the collective unconscious of humanity, the fear of a night that never ends. Since the beginning of history, darkness has carried unease. Human beings once gathered around fire to resist the night, told stories beneath the stars to forget the vastness beyond the flames. Perhaps because somewhere deep inside, we have always associated light with life itself. And so, the thought of a place where the sun never rises touches something primal within the human mind. Yet strangely, scientists believe that the most habitable region on such planets may exist precisely between the light and the dark. Not the endless day, not the eternal night, but the narrow boundary between them, a thin ring where the world remains forever in twilight, neither fully bright nor fully dark, always suspended in dusk. Try to imagine that place. You stand upon a distant planet. Beyond the horizon, a motionless orange-red light stretches endlessly across the land. The sun never climbs higher, yet never disappears. Everything remains frozen within an eternal evening. The air may be gentler than the burning side of the planet, not as deadly cold as the endless night beyond. A fragile balance between two opposites. And there is something beautiful in realizing that the place most capable of sustaining life may exist precisely between light and darkness. Jung would likely have loved that idea, because his entire psychology revolved around balance between opposing forces within the human soul. He believed true maturity does not come from living only in light, but from learning how to reconcile both darkness and light within oneself. Perhaps that is why the eternal twilight zone of those planets feels less like astronomy and more like a psychological symbol. It reminds us that life often emerges in places of balance, not in extremes, not in absolute light, not in absolute darkness, but in the soft space where two worlds touch. And then we begin to realize something even stranger. On tidally locked planets, light is not merely time, it becomes geography. On Earth, we use maps to understand place. North, south, oceans, mountains. But on those distant worlds, location itself may be defined by light. The closer you move toward the sunlit side, the hotter the world becomes. The deeper you travel into darkness, the colder everything grows. Light becomes climate, becomes survival, becomes the architecture of the entire planet. There is something deeply strange about that for the human mind, because here, light is no longer simply something that shines upon the world. It is the world. And perhaps the human psyche works in much the same way. There are regions of memory constantly illuminated by awareness, the stories we tell about ourselves, the things we remember clearly. But there are also regions hidden deep within the unconscious places, holding unnamed emotions, forgotten dreams, and versions of ourselves we rarely dare to face directly. Jung believed that most of human inner life unfolds within that darkness. We believe we understand ourselves, yet the part truly illuminated is only a very small fragment. Perhaps that is why the skies of tidally locked planets feel strangely meditative. They make us think differently about light, not only as physics, but as awareness. Not everything that exists can be seen. Not everything within the mind receives a dawn. Some memories remain forever in darkness. Some emotions remain permanently suspended in twilight. And perhaps that is not entirely frightening. Because even within the universe, darkness is not the opposite of beauty. The darkest regions of space still contain nebulae, unborn stars, and silent planets orbiting distant suns. Sometimes, life quietly forms within darkness itself. Human beings are much the same. The deepest transformations rarely happen during bright and glorious moments, but during the quietest periods, sleepless nights, lonely seasons of life, moments when no dawn seems to exist ahead. Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." Perhaps these worlds without dawn are inviting us to do exactly that, to look inward. Because when the light no longer changes, humanity begins paying closer attention to the darkness within itself. And it is strange to realize that somewhere out there, such worlds truly exist. Lands where the sun remains motionless for millions of years, where the sky never changes color, where no one has ever witnessed morning begin. If a living being existed upon such a planet, their understanding of time would likely be completely different from ours. On Earth, we measure time through movement, clock hands, shifting shadows, passing days. But on tidally locked worlds, perhaps time is not felt through hours, but through proximity to light. You do not say morning or night. You live close to the light, or far from it. An idea both strange and poetic, because in the end, human beings live that way too. Some people move through life carrying great light within them. Others remain trapped too long in inner darkness. And most of us exist somewhere between those two extremes, inside a long psychological twilight, not completely happy, not completely hopeless, simply continuing onward, searching quietly for meaning beneath the soft, dim light of being human. Perhaps that is what makes these planets so beautiful. They do not merely expand humanity's scientific understanding. They make us look back at ourselves, because sometimes the universe reflects nothing other than the human soul. The deeper we gaze into the stars, the more we realize we, too, are filled with unexplored regions of light and shadow. And tonight, before sleep finds you, try imagining this. Somewhere out there, a planet quietly turns around its star, one half buried in eternal fire, the other sleeping within endless night. Between those two extremes stretches a ring of unmoving twilight surrounding the entire world like a band of pale light. No sunrise, no sunset, only stillness suspended within the deep silence of space. And there is something strange in knowing that, no matter how unfamiliar the universe becomes, those distant worlds, still somehow reflect the human soul itself, always searching for balance between light and darkness, lava planets and the worlds of hell. Perhaps one of the reasons human beings feel safe upon Earth is the sense that the ground beneath our feet is stable. Stone represents permanence. Mountains feel older than human memory itself. And when we imagine a planet, we almost automatically assume it must possess a solid, quiet, enduring surface. But out there, deep within the darkness of the universe, exist worlds that completely shatter that familiar feeling. Planets where rock is no longer solid, where the ground melts like water, where mountains evaporate into the atmosphere, and where the planet itself is being stretched, burned, and torn apart by its own star. They do not resemble worlds in the way humanity once imagined. They resemble enormous cosmic furnaces glowing red in the void. And strangely, despite how terrifying they are, these planets still possess an almost hypnotic beauty. A beauty born from extremity. A beauty that forces humanity to realize the universe is not as gentle as we once wished to believe. Among these hellish worlds, there is one particular planet that often causes astronomers to fall silent for a few moments whenever they speak its name. 55 Cancri, a rocky planet located around 40 light-years from Earth. At first, that may not sound especially remarkable, until you learn that its surface may be an enormous ocean of lava. Try imagining that slowly. Not an ocean of water, not blue seas reflecting the sky, but seas of molten stone, a glowing crimson horizon stretching endlessly, where the ground burns like embers inside a furnace. The temperatures on that world are so extreme that rock itself can no longer maintain its form. It melts, flows like rivers, moves beneath the sky like a living ocean of fire. There is something deeply primal in that image, as though we are witnessing an ancient version of Earth itself, before our planet had fully cooled. Carl Gustav Jung believed that beneath modern civilization, humanity still carries ancient collective memories within. He called this the collective unconscious, a deep layer where ancient symbols continue to exist silently inside every human mind. Perhaps that is why the image of lava affects us so powerfully. Fire is never merely fire. It is a symbol of destruction, of transformation, of something both terrifying and irresistibly beautiful. For thousands of years, human beings have looked upon volcanoes as though confronting a living force. It is no coincidence that many ancient civilizations believed angry gods lived beneath the earth, because lava makes a planet seem emotional, as though the world itself is capable of rage. And on planets like 55 Cancri E, that feeling becomes even stronger, because there, fire does not erupt only in isolated places. The entire planet is almost entirely fire. No forests, no gentle oceans, no rain, no springtime, only heat, an immense, endless heat covering the whole world. But the most astonishing part is this: such planets truly exist. For centuries, humanity believed our solar system represented the normal structure of the universe. Rocky planets near the star, gas giants farther away, everything orderly and stable. Then exoplanets were discovered, and every new discovery slowly shattered that comforting illusion. Scientists realized that nature has no obligation to behave according to human imagination. It can create worlds so hot that metal evaporates, worlds where rain falls as molten iron, worlds where even stone becomes fragile as liquid. Perhaps what makes these hellish planets so haunting is not only their temperature, but the way they destroy our familiar definition of what a world should be. On Earth, we believe the ground is the most stable thing imaginable. But out there, the ground itself can boil, mountains can melt, even the sky may be made from vaporized rock. And that creates a strange feeling within the mind. The realization that everything we call permanent may only be temporary conditions, Jung once said that human beings are always trying to build a sense of stability for themselves. We create routines, identities, stories about who we are, but deep beneath all of it, the mind is always changing, just like those planets. From far away, they appear calm and silent, yet inside, everything is violently moving. Perhaps human beings are the same, calm on the outside, but internally filled with oceans of emotional lava that never fully cooled. Fears, suppressed anger, passions burning silently for years. Jung believed most of human inner life exists beneath conscious awareness. Like magma hidden deep beneath Earth's crust, we believe we control everything, until one day, the pressure becomes too great, and everything erupts. Perhaps that is why hell planets both frighten and fascinate us, because they reflect something profoundly human, an inner world quietly burning. Some planets go even beyond lava. They are so hot that rock itself begins to evaporate. Pause for a moment and truly feel the meaning of that. On Earth, stone almost symbolizes eternity, but on those ultra-hot worlds, stone becomes gas. Mountains stop being mountains. They soften, glow, and dissolve into the atmosphere. The very concept of ground begins losing meaning. Jung once said that when the human mind confronts something completely beyond familiar experience, it enters a state of fear and expansion at the same time. That is why strange dreams leave such powerful emotions behind, because they melt ordinary logic. And hell planets do the same thing to our imagination. They force the mind to admit that the universe may function in ways utterly alien to human understanding. Not merely slightly different, but so different that human language almost fails to describe them. Because weather, earth, sky, and ocean no longer hold familiar meaning there. On some planets, the sky glows red like an enormous furnace. Not the soft red of an earthly sunset, but the burning light of a giant industrial fire, a dense orange-red glow covering everything. If you stood upon such a world, you might not feel as though you were standing on a planet at all, but inside a process, a colossal act of cosmic metallurgy, a place where matter itself has never fully finished becoming. Everything still melting, warping, reforming itself. And strangely, that is also how Jung understood the human soul. He did not believe the psyche was fixed. He believed human beings are a process, a continuous melting and reshaping, pain, crisis, loss. Sometimes these are not signs of ending, but the necessary temperature for another version of the self to emerge. Just as stone must melt before becoming something new, wandering planets in the darkness. Perhaps one of humanity's oldest fears is being left alone in the dark. Not the darkness of a room with the lights turned off, but something far deeper. The darkness of disconnection, of no longer belonging anywhere at all. Since the earliest days of existence, human beings have lived around fire, then around villages, then around cities glowing with light. We are creatures of connection. Perhaps that is why the idea of a planet completely alone in space carries such a strange feeling. Out there, within the immense darkness between the stars, exist worlds that orbit no sun at all, no sunrise, no starlight, no gentle orbit around a familiar source of warmth. They drift alone through the galaxy. Astronomers call them rogue planets, wandering planets, and even the name itself carries a profound sadness. A planet without a sun sounds almost like a heart, with nowhere left to return. For centuries, humanity believed that every planet must belong to a star system, that every world needed a sun, much like every human being needs a home, a family, a center to revolve around. But then science began uncovering things far stranger. There are planets that were thrown out of their own star systems, perhaps during the violent early chaos of a young planetary system, when giant worlds pulled at one another with immense gravity. A smaller planet drifted slightly too far. A tiny mistake in orbit, a gravitational pull too strong, one passing encounter at the wrong moment. And then it was cast into the endless void. There is something heartbreaking about imagining that in human terms. A world that once had sunlight, once belonged somewhere, once moved among a family of planets, and then, one day, it was pushed away, forever. Carl Gustav Jung once said that deep within the human psyche exists a primal fear of exile. Not only exile from a physical place, but the feeling of losing connection to meaning, to community, to the center that once kept us stable. Perhaps that is why rogue planets affect us so deeply, because they resemble cosmic symbols of loneliness. A world with no sun left to orbit, a soul with no center. But the strangest part is this: some of these planets may still be alive, and that changes human imagination completely. Because in ordinary thinking, the sun means life. No sun means death. No light, no warmth, no hope. But the universe, as always, is far stranger than that. Some rogue planets may retain heat for billions of years. Deep within their cores, radioactive elements continue quietly decaying, producing energy, like embers still glowing beneath cold ash. From the outside, the planet may appear like a silent black sphere drifting through emptiness, but deep inside, warmth still survives. There is something incredibly beautiful about that idea. A world with no light from outside, still carrying fire within itself. And it is difficult not to think about human beings. Jung believed that every individual possesses an inner flame, a hidden source of life, not entirely dependent upon the external world. Sometimes people lose many things: a relationship, a home, a belief, a beautiful chapter of life. We may feel as though we have been thrown out of our old orbit, like a rogue planet, drifting, directionless, without the familiar sun we once depended on. But Jung believed true growth often begins precisely there, not when everything remains bright and clear, but when a person is forced to learn how to find warmth within themselves. Perhaps that is why wandering planets feel both sorrowful and miraculous, because they reveal that a world does not necessarily need sunlight in order to continue existing. Sometimes, it only needs to preserve the fire inside. Some rogue planets may even retain thick atmospheres. Imagine that, a planet drifting through absolute darkness, wrapped inside a dense layer of air like a blanket. That atmosphere traps heat, preventing the world from losing all its warmth to the freezing emptiness of space. Hydrogen is especially good at doing this. It can transform what appears to be a dead world into a place still quietly preserving warmth beneath its surface. And suddenly, these lonely planets begin to feel different. No longer meaningless frozen stones drifting through darkness, but sealed worlds, silent, secretive, protecting their warmth through billions of years of night. Jung once wrote that there are periods in life when a person must learn to turn inward, not to escape the world, but to protect the essential core of the self. Perhaps rogue planets are doing the same thing. They no longer receive energy from outside, so they retreat inward around their hidden warmth, like a soul surviving a long winter through memory of fire. And then comes the strangest idea of all. Some rogue planets may contain liquid water beneath layers of ice. At first, that sounds impossible. How could a planet without a sun contain liquid water? But if the planetary core remains warm enough, and the ice above thick enough to trap heat, then deep below the frozen surface, water may still exist in liquid form. A dark ocean, no sunlight, no blue sky, no dawn, only water silently existing beneath kilometers of ice. Perhaps no image in astronomy feels both lonelier and more beautiful than that. A hidden ocean in absolute darkness. Jung believed that the deepest parts of the human soul resemble a covered ocean. Conscious awareness is only the surface ice. Beneath lies the unconscious, dark, deep, and full of hidden life. Perhaps that is why the idea of underground oceans on rogue planets touches something so profound within us, because human beings often live the same way, cold on the outside, quiet, distant, but deep inside, emotions still exist, memories still exist, the longing for connection still exists. Sometimes the loneliest looking person is carrying an entire ocean within themselves. And the astonishing thing is this: the universe constantly reminds humanity that life is more resilient than we ever imagined. We once believed life required direct sunlight, yet somewhere out there, beneath the frozen crust of a rogue planet, liquid water may survive for billions of years. Perhaps even forms of life humanity has never imagined. That possibility expands the meaning of habitable more than ever before. Life is no longer confined only to beautiful, illuminated regions around stars. It may also exist in darkness, just like the human soul. Many people believe light is the only thing capable of healing. But Jung understood that sometimes people grow precisely by passing through darkness, not by avoiding it, but by learning how to live beside it. He called this journey individuation, the process of becoming oneself. And strangely, that journey often begins with feeling lost, like rogue planets, leaving old orbits behind, losing the familiar sun, drifting through darkness where everything that once gave meaning disappears. But precisely there, another kind of light begins to emerge, not from outside, but from within. Perhaps this is what makes rogue planets one of the most symbolic images in the universe, because they force us to ask, can a world still remain a world without a sun? And deeper still, can a human being still remain themselves after losing everything that once defined them? Jung would likely answer, yes, because the true essence of a soul does not lie in what revolves around it, but in what it preserves within darkness. Out there may be billions of rogue planets, worlds no one sees, worlds reflecting no starlight, worlds almost invisible, except for the faint gravitational effects they create. And that, too, feels deeply human. There are people who live very quietly, not famous, not dazzling, not constantly illuminated by the attention of the world. Yet inside them, warmth still exists, depth still exists, hidden oceans still exist. Jung believed modern society became too obsessed with external light, success, image, attention. But he believed the deepest things often grow in silence, like a rogue planet preserving warmth within darkness. Perhaps that is why the thought of wandering planets feels strangely comforting, because they remind us that a world does not need constant illumination to possess value. It does not need to stand at the center of a star system. It does not need to be seen. It may still exist, still preserve warmth, still carry hidden oceans within itself. And perhaps human beings are the same. There are moments in life when we feel pushed out of orbit. Everything familiar disappears. We no longer know where we belong. But perhaps that is not the end. Perhaps it is simply the moment when we begin learning how to shine differently, not through sunlight, but through warmth from within. Out there, in the endless darkness between the stars, there may exist a planet that has not witnessed a sunrise for billions of years, a world silently drifting through the galaxy. No day, no night, no seasons, only endless darkness surrounding it, and deep beneath its thick frozen shell, there may still be a warm hidden ocean untouched by light, a silent black sea preserving life in secrecy. If we think long enough about that, we begin to understand that the universe is not as simple as humanity once believed. Light is not the only thing capable of sustaining existence. Sometimes, darkness can preserve life too. And perhaps that is the most beautiful lesson rogue planets teach us. That even when cast into the coldest emptiness imaginable, a world may still continue existing through the quiet fire hidden inside it, just like human beings. Sometimes, what keeps us alive is not the sun outside, but the small warmth within the soul that refuses to go out. Water worlds without shores. Perhaps no image makes human beings feel both peaceful and small. quite like the ocean. Long before we understood planets or galaxies, humanity stood before the sea and sensed something beyond words. Waves rolled endlessly onto the shore, like the breathing of some enormous creature. The horizon stretched forever. Moonlight reflected across the water, softening the darkness of night. Earth's oceans have always carried the feeling of life itself. They nourish rain, carry the memory of rivers, and perhaps were the first place life ever began. Maybe that is why, within the human mind, water has always been associated with softness. The sea is often imagined as something gentle, forgiving, almost maternal. Carl Gustav Jung believed water was one of the deepest symbols of the unconscious. He suggested that when people dream of oceans, rivers, or deep waters, the mind may be touching hidden layers of the unconscious self. Water symbolizes emotion, unspoken memory, the depths that consciousness cannot fully control. Perhaps that is why the ocean fascinates human beings while also frightening them, because looking into the deep sea feels strangely similar to looking into the deepest part of one's own soul. But when humanity began discovering distant exoplanets, we realized something astonishing. Oceans elsewhere in the universe are not necessarily gentle. Out there exist ocean worlds, planets where the seas are so deep that human imagination can barely comprehend them. Not a few kilometers deep like Earth's oceans, but perhaps thousands of kilometers deep. Pause for a moment and truly imagine that. A planet entirely covered in water, no continents, no beaches, no mountains rising above the surface, no place called land, from one pole to the other, only water, an endless ocean. There is something both beautiful and terrifying in that idea, because on Earth, the sea is balanced by land. Human beings need shorelines to feel safe. We love the ocean, but we still stand upon the shore to look at it. The coastline is a gentle boundary between chaos and stability, but on those water worlds, no such boundary exists. No place to return to land, only ocean stretching forever beneath unfamiliar skies. And perhaps that is the moment when the idea of the ocean itself begins to change. It no longer symbolizes relaxation, but infinity, and human beings have always been haunted by infinity. Jung once said that the human mind both longs for the infinite and fears it. We wish to discover something larger than ourselves, yet when truly confronted with absolute vastness, we begin to feel ourselves dissolving. Perhaps that is what standing upon an ocean world would feel like. No shores, no ending, no shelter, only water and an endlessly repeating horizon. And strangely, those oceans may be far more alien than any sea on Earth, because at such unimaginable depths, pressure begins doing something the human mind rarely expects. It transforms water into ice, even while temperatures remain extremely high. It sounds paradoxical, but deep beneath the oceans of these worlds, immense pressure can force water into strange forms of ice, known as high-pressure ice. Not the soft, frozen snow humanity knows, but bizarre crystalline forms compressed beneath the crushing weight of entire oceans above them. That means a water world might be structured like this: sky, then oceans thousands of kilometers deep, then a layer of high-pressure ice beneath the sea, and far below that, the rocky core of the planet itself. A world where water and stone no longer touch one another in familiar ways. There is something profoundly surreal about that image, because on Earth, water always flows upon land. But here, an entire layer of strange ice separates the ocean from the planet below, as though water itself has become unfamiliar to its own nature. Jung believed that what unsettles humanity most is when the familiar suddenly becomes strange. He called this feeling the uncanny, the strange sensation that arises when something once familiar loses its old shape. And ocean worlds are exactly that, on a cosmic scale. We think we understand water, but out there, Water may exist in forms that make every earthly memory of the sea feel very small. Perhaps that is one of astronomy's deepest lessons. The universe constantly takes the most familiar things and transforms them into something entirely alien. The sea is no longer simply sea. Rain is no longer simply water. The sky is no longer blue. And suddenly we realize how fragile human understanding truly is. Super-puff planets and the worlds that are almost empty. There is something deeply fascinating about the way human beings see the world. We tend to believe what our eyes notice first. What is larger is often assumed to be stronger. What appears more massive feels more important. And things that overwhelm us with their size quietly persuade the human mind that they must contain equal greatness within. Perhaps this is a very ancient reflex of consciousness. For thousands of years, humanity has stood before mountains and felt small, before oceans and felt awe, beneath star-filled skies and believed that such immense things must surely contain powers far beyond ourselves. But then, as science began discovering exoplanets, hidden deep within the darkness of the galaxy, the universe once again quietly did what it always seems to love doing most. It shattered human intuition, because out there exist strange worlds known as super-puff planets. Planets so enormous they seem almost impossible. Some are even larger than Jupiter, the giant of our solar system itself. And yet, the strange part is this: they are so light that the mind can barely understand them. If there were an ocean large enough, some of them might almost float. It sounds like a paradox, a gigantic world, almost hollow, a massive planet, as light as cotton candy. There is something poetic in that image, but also something deeply sad, because the more we think about super-puff planets, the more they begin to feel like more than astronomical objects. They resemble psychological symbols, enormous metaphors drifting silently through cosmic darkness. Carl Gustav Jung once believed that much of human life is governed more by images than by true essence. We react to appearances, to social roles, to what is amplified and displayed outwardly. Human beings often learn to construct a larger version of themselves for the world to see. A confident exterior, a powerful image, a life that appears perfect from afar. But sometimes, inside, everything is completely different. And perhaps that is why super-puff planets feel almost philosophical. From a distance, they resemble giants of the cosmos. But in reality, most of their enormous size comes only from an immense swollen atmosphere surrounding a very tiny core, a small hidden center, wrapped inside a vast shell of light gases. If seen from far away, no one would ever guess, because their appearance creates the illusion of greatness. But their true nature is entirely different, and it becomes impossible not to think about human beings. There are people who walk into a room and instantly draw attention. They possess charisma, confidence, the appearance of complete control over their lives. Yet deep inside, they may be extraordinarily fragile. Jung called that social image the persona, the mask human beings wear in order to survive within society. The persona is not entirely false. It is necessary. People need roles in order to communicate with the world. But the problem begins when we mistake the mask for the self beneath it. And perhaps that is what those distant super-puff planets are quietly reminding us of. That size does not always reflect depth. That grandeur can sometimes be only a swollen atmosphere surrounding a very small center. There is something gentle, yet heartbreaking in that realization. Because if we look carefully, modern humanity sometimes lives exactly like super-puff planets. We are taught to appear large in career, large in personal image, large on social media, large in the eyes of others. Everything encourages people to expand the outer layers of themselves, but very few are taught how to nourish the inner core. And then, late at night, when the noise disappears, human beings sometimes begin to feel a strange emptiness. like enormous planets, almost hollow inside. Jung once said that one of the great tragedies of modern humanity is losing connection with the self, the deepest center of one's being. Not the social identity, not the external image, but the true inner core. A person may spend an entire lifetime building appearances without ever truly knowing who they are. And strangely, the universe itself seems to mirror that inner crisis. Super-puff planets exist, like fragile giant spheres drifting through space. Their atmospheres are inflated to absurd proportions, light, thin, easily affected by radiation from nearby stars. Some scientists believe these planets may slowly lose their atmospheres over time, as though they are quietly dissolving into the void. There is something profoundly sad in that image. A world trying to maintain its enormous appearance, while layers of light gas are silently stripped away by starlight. It feels strangely human. We try to maintain the image of strength, to appear stable, to seem large enough before the world. But inside, our energy may already be fading. Jung believed that when people live too far from their true selves, they eventually experience spiritual exhaustion, because maintaining an enormous version of oneself consumes tremendous energy, just like super-puff planets. The larger they become, the more fragile they are. Perhaps that is why these planets possess such an unusual beauty. Not majestic like Saturn with its perfect rings, not violent like burning lava worlds. Super-puff planets are beautiful in a more delicate way. They resemble enormous clouds drifting through darkness, soft, temporary, almost unreal. Perhaps if you stood near one, its sky would feel dreamlike. The atmosphere so thick that light would scatter gently through endless layers of clouds. No heaviness of stone or metal. Everything might feel as light as breath itself. And yet that softness makes them even harder to understand. Because the human mind constantly seeks solidity, we feel safe with things that are dense and firm. A rock, a mountain, solid ground beneath our feet. But super-puff planets seem to defy that instinct entirely. They exist despite appearing too light to exist, and that makes them a beautiful symbol for another truth of life. Not everything fragile is meaningless. Human beings often underestimate softness, gentleness, sensitivity, vulnerable souls. Modern society tends to glorify hardness, but Jung believed that the ability to feel deeply is what makes a person whole. Someone who knows only strength but cannot truly feel eventually becomes empty, like a super-puff planet without a meaningful core. Perhaps that is the most important thing these strange worlds force us to ask. What truly gives weight to a human life? The size of it, or the depth within it? A person may possess many things, yet have nowhere inside themselves that feels truly peaceful. Someone may be admired by the entire world, yet still feel hollow inside. And sometimes that emptiness does not appear suddenly. It arrives slowly, quietly, like a planet gradually losing its atmosphere to space, a little each day, until only a lonely core remains within darkness. Jung believed human beings cannot heal by endlessly expanding their outer image. They heal only by turning inward, by facing the truest parts of themselves, and that is not easy. Because inside every person exist dark regions, unnamed fears, hidden wounds, emotions suppressed for many years. But Jung believed that only by passing through that darkness does a person become real. Perhaps that is also the difference between a planet with a dense core and a world made only of swollen gas. One possesses genuine gravity, the other only expanded appearance. And strangely, the universe seems to endlessly create images reflecting human inner life. Lonely, wandering planets, worlds without dawn, endless oceans without shores, and now, gigantic planets that are almost empty inside. It feels as though the deeper humanity explores the cosmos, the more we discover ourselves, because astronomy is not only about stars, it is also about loneliness, identity, the feeling of existence itself. Jung believed human beings unconsciously project their inner worlds onto the sky. Since ancient times, we have looked at constellations and created myths, watched the movement of planets, and assigned spiritual meaning to them. Not because the universe is human, but because the human mind continually finds itself reflected in the universe. And perhaps superpuff planets move us so deeply because somewhere inside, we recognize ourselves within them. We too have tried to become larger in order to be loved, tried to impress others in order to feel valuable, expanded our social atmospheres to hide the fragile core beneath. But eventually, human beings become tired of maintaining the enormous version of themselves, tired of always appearing fine, always strong, always interesting. And that is often when the real journey begins. Jung called this journey individuation, the process of becoming oneself, no longer living merely to be seen, but learning how to truly exist, no longer trying to inflate the self endlessly, but beginning to build a deeper core within the soul. Perhaps that is the most beautiful thing superpuff planets teach us, that appearances are not the final truth. A gigantic world may still be almost empty, and something very small may contain infinite depth. Just like human beings, there are people who speak very little, yet possess inner worlds larger than the sky itself. People who do not need attention, but whose presence alone brings peace. They resemble quiet stars more than superpuff planets. No need to expand their image, no need to impress, simply existing with the true gravity of their soul. And perhaps, when night falls, that is what many people are secretly searching for, not becoming larger in the eyes of the world, but becoming more real within themselves. Out there, in the cold darkness of the galaxy, superpuff planets continue silently orbiting distant stars. Gigantic, soft, fragile, they appear enormous. Yet most of them are only vast atmospheres of light gas spread through space. A beauty that almost does not feel real. And perhaps that is exactly why they make human beings think so deeply, because sometimes the strangest things in the universe are not the things most alien to us, but the things that accidentally reflect our own souls. Those superpuff planets seem to whisper a very gentle truth through the darkness, that the true value of a world does not lie in its size, but in what exists at its deepest center. Planets orbiting two suns. There is something very strange about the way human beings imagine the universe. For most of history, we believed the place we lived was the standard: one sun, one sky, one source of light moving through time. From childhood, humanity grows within that familiar rhythm. Morning arrives when sunlight touches the window. Evening ends when the sun sinks beneath the horizon. Every shadow falls in the same direction. Every season is measured by the orbit around a single star. We become so accustomed to this that we begin assuming it is the natural order of existence. And then modern astronomy once again quietly does what it has done for centuries. It reminds humanity that the universe never promised to resemble our imagination, because out there exist planets orbiting two suns, not in mythology, not in science fiction, but in reality. One of the most famous examples is Kepler 1.6b, a distant world where two stars move around each other in an eternal dance, while the planet silently orbits both of them. If you stood upon such a world, the sky would resemble nothing humanity has ever remembered. There would be days when two suns hang above the horizon together, moments when one sun sets first while the other still burns near the edge of the sky. Shadows would split into different directions. Light would shift constantly, as though the heavens themselves could not decide between multiple realities. And the strangest part is this: such a world remains stable. It does not tear itself apart. It does not collapse into chaos. It does not fall from orbit, as human intuition once assumed. And suddenly we begin to realize something profound. Perhaps our solar system was never the standard model of the universe. It is simply one among countless possibilities nature can create. And truly, this is not only about astronomy, it is also about human beings themselves. Carl Gustav Jung believed that one of the mind's greatest illusions is assuming our personal experience represents the normal way to exist. People often live as though the way they love, the way they suffer, the way they think, is the only possible way to be human. But the older we become, the more we realize there are countless kinds of souls in this world. Some people live through reason, others through intuition. Some souls need stability, like the steady light of a single sun, but others seem born beneath two suns within themselves. They carry multiple centers of gravity at once, two desires, two identities, two sources of light, pulling them in opposite directions, and sometimes even they do not know where they belong. Jung believed the human soul is not simple. It contains opposites, light and shadow, reason and instinct, consciousness and unconsciousness, fear and longing. Much of human life is the attempt to survive between these forces without breaking apart. Like Kepler 1.6b itself, a world living between two suns. Perhaps that is why such planets move human beings so deeply, not only because of their astronomical beauty, but because they feel like metaphors for our inner lives. Because there are people who spend their entire lives feeling as though they exist between two sources of light. They love one thing, yet are drawn toward another. They long for freedom, but also long to belong. They want to be understood, yet fear being truly seen. They wish to move forward, yet cannot fully release the past. In Jungian psychology, this tension is essential. Jung believed human beings do not mature by destroying the opposites within themselves, but by learning how to allow them to coexist. Like a planet that does not choose one sun over the other, it learns to find stability between both. Perhaps that is the most beautiful thing about planets orbiting binary stars. They remind us that complexity is not the same thing as chaos. A soul filled with contradictions is not necessarily a broken soul. Sometimes it is simply a soul learning how to balance many gravitational forces at once. If you stood upon a world like Kepler 1.6b at evening, the sight would likely feel impossibly beautiful and strange. Two suns moving slowly across the sky, light constantly shifting, shadows stretching and overlapping, no moment entirely resembling the one before it, everything filled with movement. And perhaps human inner life is more like that than we realize, because very few people truly live beneath one sun. Most of us carry many sources of light within ourselves, one part trying to become a rational adult, another still remaining the lonely child from years ago, one part longing to love, another terrified of being wounded. These gravitational forces do not disappear as we grow older, they only become more subtle. And Jung believed true healing does not come from forcing ourselves to become simple. It comes from learning how to harmonize the opposing selves within us. Like a planet finding balance between two stars, there is something deeply meditative in that idea. That balance does not mean eliminating chaos, but discovering rhythm within chaos itself. The universe seems to do this constantly. Two enormous stars orbit one another for billions of years without collision. Planets move through complicated gravitational fields while continuing to survive. Everything resembles a vast symphony of gravity and time. And perhaps human beings are the same. We do not need to become perfectly singular in order to become whole. Sometimes wholeness means accepting that multiple voices will always exist within us. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming oneself, not by becoming perfect, but by reconciling the many selves within the soul. Some people spend their lives trying to live as though they possess only one sun. They want everything clear, want certainty, want reason and emotion to always agree. But human life rarely works that way. Sometimes we feel love and fear at once, hope and despair at once. the desire to stay, and the desire to disappear. And strangely, perhaps that is not failure. Perhaps that is simply how the soul works. Like planets orbiting binary stars, not chaotic, only more complicated than we once believed. Worlds born from death. Perhaps one of the things human beings fear most is the idea of endings. Not only the death of the body, but the ending of things that once burned brightly, a relationship collapsing, an older version of ourselves disappearing, a dream no longer existing, a chapter of life quietly coming to a close. Human beings often see endings as closed doors, as though nothing remains afterward except emptiness, only ashes. And yet, once again, the universe quietly does what it has always done to the human mind. It tells stories far beyond human intuition, because out there exist planets born from the deaths of stars, worlds orbiting the corpses of suns, planets existing beside neutron stars, pulsars, and white dwarfs. It sounds more like mythology than astronomy, but it is real. There are stars that once burned for billions of years, and then one day exploded violently in a supernova, an explosion powerful enough to tear apart entire planetary systems. Its light can briefly outshine an entire galaxy. Everything should have ended, and yet afterward, amid the ruins of a dead sun, a planet still remains. Or sometimes, a new planet begins forming from the remnants themselves. There is something deeply moving about that idea, that a world can be born from ashes. And perhaps that is not only an astronomical truth, perhaps it is also a profound truth about the human soul. Carl Gustav Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." He believed human beings do not mature by avoiding collapse. They mature by moving through it. And strangely, those planets orbiting dead stars seem to retell the same journey found inside the human psyche. Because in inner life, there are moments when we too experience supernovas, a great loss, a collapse that cannot be reversed, a catastrophe that tears apart the old version of ourselves completely. There are moments when everything that once defined us suddenly disappears. A marriage ends. Someone we love leaves forever. An ideal loses its meaning. It feels as though the sun inside us has died. And during such periods, the most frightening thing is not pain itself, but the feeling that nothing will ever grow again. Yet the universe seems to whisper something entirely different, that sometimes the deepest worlds are born only after destruction. Out there exist pulsars, the dense remnants left behind after a giant star explodes. They are incredibly compact. They spin with terrifying speed. They emit rhythmic beams of radiation through space, like the heartbeat of a dead star. By ordinary intuition, no one would expect planets to exist near such places. Too violent, too merciless, too dead. And yet, astronomers discovered worlds orbiting them, planets surviving beside the corpse of a sun. That idea is difficult to describe. It feels like seeing a flower growing through the ashes of a burned city. And perhaps that is why these planets move human beings so deeply. Not merely because they are rare, but because they reflect an ancient hope hidden within the soul, that after collapse, something may still continue living. Jung believed much of human life unfolds through cycles of psychological death and rebirth. Not rebirth in a mystical sense, but the way old versions of the self must die so that new ones may emerge. The child within dies so the adult may appear. Illusions die so understanding can grow. The old ego collapses so a deeper self may form. But this process is never gentle. It is painful. Like a star exploding. There are periods when people feel crushed by loss. Everything that once served as the center of life suddenly disappears, and then they enter a long darkness. Jung called it the dark night of the soul, a state in which a person no longer knows who they are. The old light is gone, the old meanings disappear, and yet precisely there, rebirth begins. like planets forming from the debris of dead stars. The universe itself does not seem to view death as absolute ending. It sees transformation. A star dies, and elements from its body scatter into space. Carbon, oxygen, iron, silicon. From those shattered fragments, new worlds appear. And it is strange to realize that the human body itself is made from the ashes of ancient stars. Jung believed the human psyche possesses layers far older than we imagine. He called this the collective unconscious, a realm preserving the ancient symbols of humanity itself. And within those symbols, death never means pure destruction. It always walks beside rebirth. The phoenix, burning and rising from ashes. Winter becoming spring, night giving way to dawn. It seems both the cosmos and the human soul move according to the same rhythm. Everything must dissolve before becoming something new. Perhaps that is why the idea of diamond planets fascinates people so deeply. Some scientists believe certain worlds contain immense quantities of crystallized carbon under unimaginable pressure. Planetary cores compressed for billions of years, until carbon transforms into structures harder than anything naturally found on Earth. The idea feels almost poetic. A giant diamond, created by unbearable pressure and endless time. And are human beings not similar? There are pains that seem as though they will destroy us. But sometimes, that same pressure creates depths that never existed before. Jung believed wounds are not merely things to heal from. Sometimes they become doors into the deepest parts of the soul. A person who has never experienced profound loss often cannot fully understand compassion. Someone who has never broken apart often does not yet know themselves. There are forms of beauty that appear only after collapse, like diamonds formed beneath crushing pressure. Out there, planets orbiting white dwarfs continue silently circling through darkness. A white dwarf is the remaining core of a sun that has exhausted its fuel, no longer blazing like before, no longer burning fiercely. Only a pale, aging white light remains. There is something deeply sad about that image, a sun that has nearly finished its life, and yet planets still continue orbiting it. It feels like a kind of cosmic loyalty, as though even after the brightest light has faded, certain orbits still remain. Perhaps human beings carry such orbits within themselves as well. We continue living beside memories of what has been lost. Someone who left, a chapter that ended, an older self that no longer exists. These things no longer burn as they once did, but they still shape the inner gravity of our lives. Jung never believed the past should simply be erased. He believed maturity comes when people learn how to live alongside what has died within them. Not denying it, not fleeing from it, but allowing it to become part of the architecture of the soul. Like planets orbiting dead stars, some sorrows never disappear entirely, but with time, they stop being pure destruction. They become quiet gravitational forces shaping who we become. And sometimes, the people who have broken most deeply become the gentlest souls, because they understand the fragility of existence. There is something profoundly comforting in the idea that the universe wastes nothing. Not even a supernova is truly an ending. It simply opens another form of existence. Perhaps that is why astronomy so often causes human beings to reflect upon inner life itself. The deeper we look into the stars, the more we recognize the same laws within the soul: formation, collapse, rebirth. Jung once said, "No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." The planets born from dead stars seem to tell precisely the same story. For a new world to exist, a sun must first die. For a more mature self to emerge, an older self must collapse. This is not romantic. It hurts. But perhaps pain is not evidence of failure. Sometimes it is evidence that something new is forming. If you stood upon a planet orbiting a pulsar, the sky would likely possess a terrifying beauty. No gentle sunlight, only cold beams of radiation sweeping through space with the rhythm of a dead star's spin. everything would resemble the ruins of an ancient catastrophe. And yet even there, orbits still exist. Movement still exists. A world still exists. That is remarkable. It feels like a reminder that inner life often continues in the same way. Even after grief, after depression, after collapse, we think some part of us has died, and yet slowly, a new self begins forming from the old fragments. Not the same as before, but deeper. Jung called this transformation, not returning to the old self, but becoming someone new after passing through darkness. And perhaps those planets orbiting dead stars are the universe's most beautiful image of that process. They do not deny catastrophe. Their very existence proves catastrophe occurred. And yet they continue orbiting, continue existing, continue telling a new story. Perhaps that is what human beings most need to hear during the longest nights of life. That an ending is not always the final sentence. Sometimes it is merely the moment old things are burned away so that something truer may appear. Out there, within the deep darkness of the galaxy, worlds born from ashes continue silently existing, orbiting cold stellar corpses, carrying crystallized carbon, forged under unbearable pressure, drifting through billions of years in silence. They feel like the universe's memory of rebirth itself. And perhaps that is also the most beautiful thing Jung tried to say about human beings, that the soul does not merely possess the ability to endure darkness, it also possesses the ability to create new light from within that darkness itself, like a planet born from the death of a star, like a heart once shattered that eventually learns how to love again. Chaotic planetary systems. There is a deep comfort human beings unconsciously seek when looking up at the night sky. The feeling that the universe operates according to perfect order, that stars move along precise paths, that planets orbit calmly around their suns, that everything out there is stable, balanced, and serene. That thought helps people breathe more easily, because in a world filled with uncertainty, we want to believe that at least the cosmos remains organized. And yet modern astronomy once again gently destroys that familiar illusion. Out there exist planetary systems so chaotic they seem almost impossible. Worlds colliding with one another, planets swallowed by their own stars. Orbits tilted so strangely they seem to defy all balance. There are star systems where planets crowd together within tiny regions of space. Worlds thrown away by gravity like wandering stones between the stars. And perhaps the most astonishing thing is this: even within such chaos, the universe continues functioning without panic, without stopping. Carl Gustav Jung believed one of humanity's greatest illusions is the belief that the soul must be completely stable in order to be considered normal. But he observed the opposite. He realized that the human psyche is naturally filled with conflict. Different parts of the mind constantly collide. Reason and instinct, light and shadow, the longing for freedom, and the need for safety. Human beings are not perfectly ordered structures. We are miniature universes filled with turbulence. And perhaps that is why those chaotic planetary systems affect us so deeply, because they mirror the truth already existing within the human soul. We often think maturity means becoming perfectly stable. But Jung believed true maturity means learning how to live with the chaos inside ourselves, like those planetary systems. Not perfect, not motionless, but still moving. There are systems where planets do not follow smooth circular orbits like Earth. Their paths are violently tilted. Some almost seem upside down. Certain worlds move along stretched, distorted ellipses, rushing dangerously close to their stars, before drifting back into freezing darkness. By ordinary intuition, such systems should not survive long, and yet they do. Much like many human beings, outwardly chaotic, internally conflicted, emotionally unstable, and yet somewhere deep within, an invisible gravity still keeps them alive. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming oneself. And what is fascinating is that this journey rarely unfolds in straight lines. It resembles strange orbits instead. People move forward, then backward, understand themselves, then become lost again, heal, then break apart once more. There are periods when life feels like a collapsing planetary system. Relationships disintegrate, old beliefs vanish, future plans collapse. It feels as though every familiar orbit has shifted, and that is terrifying, because human beings long to predict their lives. We want everything to function neatly like a clock, but the universe never truly promised that. Out there, planets are swallowed by their own stars. As stars age, they expand into red giants. Slowly, they consume the worlds that once orbited them for billions of years. The image feels both beautiful and tragic. A planet surviving for immense stretches of time, only to disappear inside the very source of light that once nourished it. And there is something profoundly human about that. Sometimes, the things that once saved us later become the things that wound us. A love, once serving as shelter, becomes pain. An ambition once giving purpose burns the soul. An identity once making us strong becomes a prison. Jung believed everything within the psyche possesses two sides. Even light, when taken to extremes, can become darkness. And perhaps stars themselves are similar. They are sources of life, but also forces of destruction. Yet what is most fascinating is this: even destruction belongs naturally to the universe. There is no anger in it, no tragedy in the human sense, only movement, only transformation. Perhaps what truly causes suffering is not chaos itself, but the belief that chaos should not exist. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." He never saw inner conflict as failure. He saw it as a necessary part of life, like colliding planets. At first, collisions seem catastrophic, but many new worlds are born from collisions. Moons form, orbits change, systems gradually settle into new forms of stability. Strangely enough, even Earth itself may have been born from an enormous ancient collision. Our moon may be the remnant of a world that crashed into the young Earth billions of years ago. If that is true, then part of the peaceful beauty of tonight's sky was created from primordial chaos. That feels deeply human too. Some of the gentlest souls survived the fiercest storms. Some people understand love most deeply because they once knew unbearable loneliness. Sometimes collision itself creates depth, not beauty, despite the wounds, but beauty because of them. Out there also exist systems like TRAPPIST-1, a tiny star surrounded by planets, orbiting extremely close together. If you stood on one of those worlds, the neighboring planets might appear larger than Earth's moon appears from our sky. The planets are so close that their gravity constantly pulls against one another. Everything resembles a complicated gravitational dance. At first glance, it sounds chaotic, and yet scientists discovered these planets move according to rhythms so precise they almost resemble mathematics. A kind of gravitational resonance so delicate it feels like music, as though beneath chaos, there still exists an invisible rhythm. And that idea says something profound about human psychology, because inner life often feels similar. Outwardly full of contradictions, full of clashing emotions, full of conflicting thoughts, yet somewhere beneath it all, an unseen structure still attempts to create balance. Jung believed the unconscious is not meaningless disorder. He believed dreams, symbols, and emotions, though seemingly random, are actually guiding human beings toward wholeness, like planets inside a gravitational symphony. Each world pulls and is pulled, affects and is affected, and yet the system continues surviving. Perhaps human relationships work the same way. We constantly influence one another. A glance, a sentence, a separation. Everything alters the orbit of another person's soul. No one truly remains motionless in another life, just as no planet is ever fully isolated from surrounding gravity. And sometimes, the briefest encounters alter an entire life forever. A conversation, a love, a loss, all of it behaves like invisible gravity. We cannot see it, but it bends the trajectory of the soul permanently. Jung believed life does not unfold entirely through randomness. He believed strange forms of meaningful synchronicity exist between human beings and the universe. Meetings that occur at precisely the right moment. Symbols that repeat themselves. Events appearing accidental yet transforming the inner journey entirely. Perhaps that is why people feel as though they are seeing their own lives reflected in chaotic planetary systems. Not perfect, not completely stable, yet still containing hidden rhythms. There are planets thrown entirely out of their systems, a slight gravitational disturbance, a tiny shift in orbit, and suddenly a whole world is cast into interstellar darkness. It sounds unbearably lonely. But are human beings not similar at times? Some people no longer feel they belong where they once called home, no longer belong to a relationship, a community, an older version of themselves. They drift through life like planets without orbit. Jung understood this feeling deeply. He himself endured psychological crises, so profound he nearly lost all orientation. But instead of fleeing his inner chaos, he entered it. And there he discovered something extraordinary. Sometimes losing direction is not failure. Sometimes it is the necessary stage before a new orbit forms, like planetary systems themselves. Not all chaos leads to destruction. Sometimes it leads to reorganization. There is something deeply comforting in that thought, that we do not need to become perfect in order to continue existing. Not everything in life must remain in place. Even the universe itself is not a perfectly clean machine. It is filled with collisions, instability, distorted orbits, and despite all this, it still creates beauty. Perhaps beauty exists precisely because of the chaos. If everything remained perfectly fixed, the universe would never evolve. No new stars, no new planets, no life. And similarly, if human beings never experienced inner conflict, perhaps we too would never grow. Jung believed wholeness does not mean eliminating darkness. It means learning how light and darkness can coexist within the same soul, like a planetary system, maintaining balance, while gravitational forces endlessly pull against one another. Perhaps that is the most beautiful thing about the universe. It does not demand perfection. It simply continues moving. Out there, worlds are still colliding in silence. Orbits are still changing across millions of years. Planets are still being swallowed, thrown away, and pulled into strange paths. And somewhere amidst all that chaos, breathtaking gravitational symphonies continue to exist. Perhaps the human soul is the same. Beneath all our anxieties, contradictions, and fractures, there is still a hidden rhythm trying to guide us toward growth, not through perfect stability, but through the ability to keep orbiting, even when the path is never perfect. And when we think about that on a quiet night, perhaps the heart softens a little, because maybe the chaos inside us is not proof that we are broken. Maybe it is simply proof that we too are a very natural part of this universe, a universe that was never truly orderly, yet has always remained beautiful in its own way. How human beings discovered distant worlds. We are tiny creatures, living on a tiny planet, orbiting an ordinary star within a galaxy containing hundreds of billions of suns. And yet, somehow, human beings have always wanted to look beyond the darkness, to know what else exists out there, to understand whether, within the cold emptiness of the universe, there are worlds quietly circling distant stars. What is astonishing is not that we are curious, it is that we truly found them. Exoplanets, dozens, hundreds, even thousands of light years away from Earth. Worlds no human being has ever touched, never seen with the naked eye, never walked upon. And yet, human beings can still know they exist. Not only know they exist, but know how large they are, how long they take to orbit their stars, what gases fill their skies, sometimes even the color of the light upon them. If one thinks about this long enough, it begins to feel almost sacred, because it reveals something profoundly beautiful about the human mind. We are always reaching toward what lies beyond our grasp. Carl Gustav Jung once said that within every human being exists a pull toward the unknown. He believed the soul cannot live forever inside what is familiar. It always wants to expand, to step into darkness, to search for symbols not yet named. And perhaps humanity's search for exoplanets is another expression of that instinct. We are not only searching for worlds beyond ourselves, we are searching for ourselves through them. Because each time a new planet is discovered, what changes is not merely the map of the cosmos. What changes is the way human beings understand their own place within existence. Long ago, our ancestors believed Earth stood at the center of everything. Then science revealed that we are not the center, and modern astronomy went even further. It told us that even our solar system is not special. Out there exist billions of other worlds, some stranger than anything human beings once imagined. And the miraculous thing is this: we discovered all of it, mostly through light, only through tiny vibrations hidden within darkness. There is a famous method called transit. It works in an almost gentle way. When a planet passes in front of its star, the star's light dims by an incredibly small amount, only the faintest blink within an endless sea of light. But telescopes are delicate enough to notice, and from that nearly invisible dimming, humanity realizes a world is passing there. An unseen planet suddenly becomes real, simply because it weakened the light slightly. This idea feels so beautiful, it almost becomes symbolic, because sometimes human life works in the same way. We do not truly see one another completely. We only feel someone's presence through the changes they create within the light of our lives. A person enters our existence, and suddenly the inner sky changes, softer, warmer, or sometimes darker. Like a planet crossing a star, it leaves only the smallest trace, but enough to alter perception forever. Jung believed human beings rarely understand themselves directly. We recognize ourselves through reflections cast upon the world around us, through dreams, symbols, emotions, tiny vibrations. Just as astronomers do not see exoplanets directly with their eyes, they discover them through their influence upon light. Perhaps many of the deepest things in life must be recognized in the same way, not directly, but through traces. Another method is even stranger: radial velocity, the method of making a star wobble. It feels strange to imagine that a tiny planet could cause a giant star to tremble, but that is precisely what happens. As a planet orbits its star, its gravity gently pulls the star back and forth, only slightly. So slightly it is almost impossible to imagine, yet enough to subtly change the starlight. And from that delicate wobble, humanity discovers a world light years away. There is something deeply Jungian about this idea, because Jung believed the smallest movements within the soul often reveal the largest truths. A passing sadness, a recurring dream, a nameless unease. At first glance, they appear tiny, yet sometimes they are signs that an entire inner universe is shifting, like a star trembling because of an invisible planet. Human beings also tremble because of things they do not fully understand yet. An old memory, a buried shadow, a longing not yet named. And if we are attentive enough, we can read those movements. Perhaps science and psychology were never as distant as people imagined. Both are attempts to listen carefully to tiny vibrations inside darkness. Then there is gravitational microlensing, one of the strangest and most poetic methods in astronomy. It works through gravity itself. When one star passes in front of another distant star, its gravity bends the light behind it. If a planet accompanies that star, the shape of the light changes slightly more. And from that fragile distortion, humanity realizes a world exists there. How strange that is. A planet discovered not because it shines, but because it bends light. This almost feels like a metaphor for the human soul, because some people do not change our lives through overwhelming presence. They merely bend our direction slightly. A brief encounter, a passing sentence, a glance at the right moment, and suddenly, the orbit of the soul changes forever. Jung called such moments synchronicity, meaningful coincidence, events that seem accidental yet deeply transform the inner journey. Like light bending beneath invisible gravity, there are things we never see directly, and yet they still alter the entire path of light within our lives. And then humanity achieved something even more beautiful. We began reading the atmospheres of exoplanets. This sounds almost impossible, a world hundreds of light years away, and we know its sky contains water vapor, carbon dioxide, sodium, or vaporized metals, all because light passes through its atmosphere. As light moves through a planet's sky, molecules leave behind their own unique fingerprints, and from those fingerprints, scientists can read the air of a world no human being has ever touched. Perhaps this is one of humanity's most miraculous achievements, because it means human beings are not merely discovering planets. We are learning how to read their skies. Jung believed every soul possesses its own symbols, its own psychological atmosphere, and if we listen carefully enough, we can read it, not through direct words, but through dreams, symbols, recurring emotions. Just as astronomers read exoplanets through light, perhaps understanding another human being works the same way. We never fully see their inner world. We only see light passing through it, a smile, a silence, the way they look at the sky when they are sad. All of these become the spectral signatures of the soul. And finally, humanity accomplished what once sounded like science fiction, direct images of exoplanets. It is not easy. A star shines so brightly that nearby planets almost disappear entirely, like trying to see a firefly beside a massive lighthouse. But with modern technology, we succeeded. Tiny points of light appearing within darkness, real worlds. No longer merely data, no longer only hypotheses, but actual planets existing somewhere out there. There is something deeply emotional about this, because for thousands of years, human beings stared at the night sky asking, are there other worlds out there? And now, we can answer, yes, those worlds truly exist, orbiting distant stars, holding their own skies, their own weather, their own light. Perhaps at this very moment, on some distant planet, metallic rain is falling through darkness. Elsewhere, two suns are rising together above the horizon. And somewhere unimaginably far away, an endless ocean lies silent beneath hundreds of kilometers of ice. And the strange thing is this: all of it exists without needing human beings to witness it. The universe does not require observation in order to become real. It continues turning silently. Jung once said the greatest mystery is not the supernatural. It is the fact that reality is always deeper than human beings imagine. And perhaps exoplanets are the most beautiful proof of that truth. They remind us, the real world is not as small as human experience once believed. It is wider, stranger, far deeper. Sometimes we think we understand life, just as humanity once believed the solar system represented the standard design of all star systems. But the universe gently proves otherwise. It is always more complicated. And perhaps the human soul is the same. There are regions within ourselves we have never explored. Inner exoplanets, orbiting through the darkness of the unconscious, sleeping memories, unnamed fears, possibilities never fully lived. Jung believed the greatest journey of human life is not conquering the outer world, but discovering the inner one. And what is fascinating is this: both journeys begin by learning how to look into darkness for a very long time. Astronomers stare into black distances spanning light years. Psychologists stare into the unconscious mind. Both are listening for tiny signals. A flicker of light, a subtle vibration, an almost invisible shift. And from that, entire worlds emerge. Perhaps this is the most beautiful thing about humanity. No matter how small we are, we still long to understand what lies beyond our limits. We still want to read the light from places we will never touch. We still want to know that other worlds quietly exist somewhere out there. Because deep within the human soul exists the feeling that life cannot contain only one story. And when thinking about this before sleep, the heart may soften a little. Out there, light from distant stars is still crossing cold space for millions of years, carrying traces of planets no one has ever touched, carrying secrets waiting to be understood. And it feels miraculous to know that, on a tiny planet called Earth, there are creatures capable of looking into darkness and learning how to listen to light. The greatest truth about the universe, perhaps one of the most beautiful moments in human history, was when we began realizing that we had misunderstood the universe. Not merely slightly misunderstood it, but misunderstood it in a deeply fundamental way. For most of human history, people imagined the universe in the image of themselves. We believed everything should be orderly, familiar, easy to understand, and for a long time, our solar system seemed to reinforce that belief. Small rocky planets near the Sun, giant gas planets farther away, relatively stable orbits, a structure that felt almost logical. Human beings unconsciously assumed, perhaps every star system looks like this, perhaps the universe prefers symmetry, perhaps nature loves familiar patterns. But then, telescopes began looking deeper into darkness, and little by little, the universe gently shattered our expectations. More than 6,000 exoplanets have now been discovered. 6,000 worlds. 6,000 proofs that reality is far greater than human imagination. There are planets where iron falls like rain, worlds stretched into egg-like shapes by overwhelming gravity, lava oceans glowing red through eternal night, rogue planets wandering without suns. And perhaps the most astonishing thing is this: every new discovery almost always forces humanity to revise what it once believed. Carl Gustav Jung believed the human mind naturally creates false order. We want the world to feel understandable, predictable, safe. But Jung also believed true maturity begins when people become brave enough to step beyond their old images of reality. And perhaps modern astronomy is one of the deepest lessons in exactly that. Because every time we think we understand the universe smiles gently and reveals something stranger ahead. There is something profoundly humbling about this experience. Human beings once believed Earth was the center. Then we learned we are only a small planet orbiting an ordinary star. Then we realized the Sun itself is only one among hundreds of billions of stars within our galaxy. And now, after discovering thousands of exoplanets, humanity understands something else. Even our solar system is not the standard design of the cosmos. It is merely one possibility among countless others. This truth makes one reflect deeply upon the human mind itself, because we often do the same thing with our own lives. We believe there is only one correct way to live, one correct form of love, one proper path toward maturity. And yet life continually proves otherwise. There are vastly different people, still living meaningful lives. Souls unlike familiar standards, yet beautiful in their own ways. Jung believed every human being possesses a unique process of individuation. No one matures along the same orbit. No one must resemble others in order to become whole. And this feels remarkably similar to exoplanets themselves. There is no single correct kind of world. The universe creates through millions of different possibilities. Perhaps this is the greatest truth exoplanets teach humanity. Reality has no obligation to match human imagination. It is always larger, deeper, stranger, and sometimes far more beautiful. There is something fascinating about the history of science. Many planets once considered impossible were later discovered to be real. Scientists once believed giant gas planets could not exist too close to their stars. Then they found hot Jupiters, enormous worlds, orbiting so near their suns that a year lasts only days. Human beings once assumed planetary systems must remain balanced and orderly. Then we discovered systems with bizarre tilted orbits resembling gravitational wars. People once believed planets required suns in order to survive. Then rogue planets appeared, worlds drifting through interstellar darkness, yet possibly retaining heat and hidden oceans beneath ice. All this reveals something deeply Jungian. Reality always contains more possibilities than the conscious mind can imagine. Jung believed the unconscious is far deeper than the small portion human beings perceive daily. And every time we think we fully understand ourselves, a dream, a memory, or an unexpected emotion appears to prove otherwise. The universe behaves similarly. It continually reminds humanity, you have only seen the surface. Perhaps that is why the discovery of exoplanets feels so moving. It is not merely science. It is a lesson in humility. Because the more humanity discovers, the more we realize how little we truly know. Long ago, simply looking at the night sky was enough to make human beings feel small. Today, that feeling has become even deeper. Because now, we know every point of light out there may possess entire planetary systems, and every planetary system may contain worlds completely unlike one another. And perhaps, the strangest planets of all have not yet been found. This realization softens the imagination, because if 6,000 exoplanets already astonish humanity, how unimaginable must the undiscovered worlds be? Perhaps there exist planets beyond the capacity of current human language to describe. Oceans unlike any liquid we know, skies displaying colors never seen on Earth, weather so strange, the concepts of rain or wind lose meaning entirely. And perhaps this is what makes the universe feel alive. It has never been finished. Jung once said the most dangerous thing for human beings is believing they fully understand reality. Because the moment we think we know everything, we stop looking, stop wondering, stop growing. Perhaps the universe protects humanity from that arrogance. Every discovery opens another doorway into deeper darkness. And strangely enough, instead of making humanity despair, it creates wonder. We do not know everything, and precisely because of that, existence becomes beautiful, like the human soul itself. If everything within us were perfectly clear, perhaps life would lose its depth. It is the unexplored regions that keep people searching inward. Jung spent his life entering the inner darkness. He never saw the unconscious as something that must be fully controlled. He saw it as an inner universe, vast, mysterious, filled with symbols not yet understood. And this feels remarkably similar to modern astronomy. The deeper we look into cosmic darkness, the more surprising things we discover, not fewer. Perhaps this is the universal law of existence itself. Depth always makes reality stranger, not simpler. Human beings often think maturity means explaining everything. But Jung seemed to believe the opposite. He believed maturity means learning how to live beside mystery, learning to accept that some parts of life will never be fully understood, like the universe. We may measure it, analyze its light, calculate its orbits, yet somewhere beneath all of that, it still preserves something untamed by reason. Perhaps that is why people remain endlessly drawn to the night sky, not only because it is beautiful, but because it reminds us that we do not understand everything, and strangely enough, that feels comforting. Because if the universe still contains endless mysteries, then human life has never truly closed itself either. There are always possibilities not yet revealed, new versions of ourselves not yet discovered, emotions never fully named, planets never yet seen. There is something profoundly gentle in realizing that, even now, there are worlds existing beyond all human knowledge. still orbiting distant stars, in complete silence, not needing attention in order to exist, not needing understanding in order to become real. And perhaps the same is true for many hidden parts of the human soul. Some aspects of ourselves exist silently for years before being recognized. A sleeping possibility, an unnamed sorrow, a tenderness never fully lived. Jung believed the human journey is not about becoming someone else. It is about gradually discovering the selves that already existed within, like astronomers discovering exoplanets. They do not create those worlds. They simply realize the worlds were always there. Perhaps this is the most beautiful thing about science. It does not remove wonder from the universe. Quite the opposite. The deeper we understand, the more astonishing existence becomes. Long ago, the night sky was merely scattered lights. Now we know each point of light may serve as the center of countless strange worlds, places where metallic rain may fall, where lava oceans glow, where supersonic storms roar, where crimson skies burn beneath twin suns. And suddenly we realize reality was never as empty as humanity once believed. It was always richer. Perhaps this is also what Jung wanted human beings to understand about the soul itself, that within every person exist more worlds than they imagine. Not only the familiar rational self, but also shadows, symbols, instincts, ancient memories, and unexplored unconscious realms. A human being is not a simple structure. They are a miniature universe, and like the cosmos itself, they are always stranger than their own imagination. Perhaps that is why exoplanets move us so deeply, because when we look at them, we are not only seeing distant worlds, we are seeing truths about existence itself, that life is vastly larger than what we can control. That reality does not need to feel familiar in order to become beautiful. And that mystery is not something frightening. Sometimes it is precisely what makes life worth living. And when thinking about this before sleep, the heart may become a little quieter, because out there, billions of worlds are still silently turning through darkness. Unnamed planets, skies no one has ever seen, oceans no one has ever dreamed of, and perhaps the strangest thing about the universe is not how vast it is, but how it forever exceeds the imagination of human beings, endlessly, without limit, never truly becoming familiar. The universe does not operate according to human expectations. It is always stranger, and that is precisely what makes existence so beautiful. Worlds spinning in the darkness. The night has become much quieter now. Perhaps at this moment, beyond your window, the city is slowly sinking into silence. The streets are dimmer. The familiar sounds of daytime have softened, and somewhere above the night sky beyond what human eyes can fully see through, the universe is still moving, silently, slowly, without needing anyone to watch. Distant planets are still orbiting their stars. Strange worlds continue existing in the deep darkness between galaxies. Metallic rain may still be falling on some burning hot planet. Elsewhere, oceans of lava may still glow faintly red, like dying embers beneath skies that never truly know dawn. The rogue planets' wandering worlds are still drifting through the frozen emptiness between stars, with no sun to call home. And on some distant world, perhaps two suns, are still rising together above the horizon of a planet no human being has ever touched. There is something deeply gentle in that thought, that the universe continues existing beyond all the small worries of human beings. Carl Gustav Jung once said that one of the reasons human beings suffer is because they become trapped inside the smallness of their own ego. We think our problems are the center of everything. We think our sadness fills the entire sky. But sometimes, simply looking toward the vastness of space softens the mind naturally, not because pain disappears, but because we realize we are only a very small part of a reality far larger than ourselves. And strangely enough, that realization brings peace, perhaps because the human soul never truly wanted to control all of existence. Deep down, what we really seek is the feeling of belonging to something larger than ourselves. The universe gives us that feeling. When we think about the billions of planets out there, the worries of daily life sometimes become a little lighter. Not meaningless, just not as heavy as before. Because out there, time moves according to rhythms far greater than ours. There are stars that died before humanity even appeared. There are planets that will continue orbiting for billions of years after every memory of us is gone. And despite all that, existence remains beautiful. That may be the strangest thing about the universe. It does not need human beings in order to become wondrous. Those distant worlds do not exist to be seen. They continue turning silently through darkness, even when no one knows their names. Jung believed that deep within the unconscious, human beings are always searching for a greater center, something beyond the small personal self. He called it the self, the deeper wholeness of the soul. And perhaps when human beings gaze into the universe, we unconsciously recognize a reflection of that, because the universe resembles the unconscious itself. Vast, mysterious, impossible to fully control, yet beautiful in a way that makes people want to keep looking forever. Tonight, we have traveled through many worlds, places where day and night no longer resemble Earth, skies where clouds are made from glass and minerals, oceans not of water, but molten stone, planets stretched by gravity as if they themselves were in pain, and lonely worlds wandering endlessly through space. If we think a little more carefully, we begin to realize what makes these planets fascinating is not only science, it is the emotions they awaken, because every world seems to reflect some state of the human soul. Tidally locked planets resemble souls trapped forever between one side of light and one side of darkness. Rogue planets resemble the loneliness human beings sometimes carry through life. Lava oceans resemble emotions that never truly cooled. And worlds with two suns resemble people who live between two different selves inside their own hearts. Jung believed every image that deeply fascinates human beings is symbolic. We do not love the universe merely because it is beautiful. We love it because it reflects something deep within our own unconscious minds. Perhaps that is why the night sky always makes people feel both small and comforted. It reminds us, existence does not need to be simple in order to become meaningful. The universe out there is profoundly chaotic. Planets collide, stars explode, orbits shift over millions of years. And despite all of that, everything still creates a beauty that feels almost sacred. Perhaps the human soul is the same. We often believe we must become completely stable in order to find peace. But Jung seemed to believe the opposite. He believed wholeness does not come from removing all chaos. It comes from learning how to live beside it, like the universe itself. Not perfect, not perfectly balanced, not fully understandable, yet still beautiful. At this very moment, while you are slowly becoming sleepy, some distant planet may still be swept by supersonic winds, moving at unimaginable speeds. Elsewhere, light from twin suns may still be falling across an unnamed desert. Some world may still be trapped in eternal darkness, and somewhere impossibly far away, a young planet may still be glowing from the heat left over from the moment of its birth. The strange thing is, all of this continues without needing us to witness it. The universe is not performing for humanity. It simply exists. Perhaps this is the most beautiful lesson astronomy gives the soul. That existence does not need recognition in order to have value. A star still burns even when no one sees it. A planet still turns even when it has never been named. And human beings are the same. Sometimes we are terrified of being not important enough. But the universe seems to whisper the opposite. That simply existing is already miraculous. Jung believed modern people suffer because they have lost connection with the sacred feeling of being alive. We live too quickly, too noisily, too focused on results. And we forget what it feels like to sit quietly, simply aware that we exist inside a vast universe. Perhaps that is why stories about exoplanets are so comforting before sleep. because they slow the mind down. When thinking about distances spanning billions of kilometers between stars, the worries of the day begin drifting farther away. The unanswered emails, the pressure of work, the small insecurities, all of it softens beneath the sky of billions of worlds. Not because these things stop mattering, but because we are reminded life is larger than whatever we are worrying about tonight. There are greater things still existing. Endless oceans beneath frozen darkness, red suns glowing faintly in distant systems, planets quietly orbiting their stars for billions of years. And perhaps the most comforting thing is this: the universe is never in a hurry. Human beings live as though everything must be solved immediately. But the planets out there move according to a very different rhythm. Slower, deeper, more patient. Some light takes millions of years to reach Earth. Some worlds exist longer than the entire history of humanity. When thinking about that, the mind slowly loosens its grip. We begin understanding that not every question must be answered tonight. Not every sadness must disappear immediately. Not every chaotic part inside us is a mistake. Jung believed healing does not mean forcing ourselves to become perfect. It means learning how to sit peacefully beside imperfection without fear. Like gazing into the universe, we do not need to fully understand it in order to feel wonder before its beauty. And perhaps we do not need to fully understand ourselves in order to deserve peace. Out there still exist countless undiscovered planets, worlds no one knows yet, skies never seen, oceans never named. And perhaps that is beautiful, because if everything were already known, the universe would lose its magic. Jung once said the important thing is not conquering mystery completely. It is preserving the ability to feel awe before it. Perhaps that is the greatest gift the night sky gives humanity. It reminds us, reality is deeper than what we understand. And that is not frightening. It is beautiful. The night is growing later now. Perhaps your eyes have already begun to grow heavier, your breathing slower, the thoughts of the day gradually dissolving into the gentle darkness of night. Out there, the universe is still turning. Metal planets, lava oceans, worlds with two suns, lonely rogue planets. All of them continue existing silently in endless space. And tomorrow, they will still be there, vast, strange, and beautiful, like life itself, never fully understandable, yet always worth looking up at one more time before falling asleep. And now, our journey through these strange worlds beyond the cosmos is slowly coming to an end. Perhaps the night has become even quieter. The sounds of the day have drifted far away. Your room has softened beneath the dim light of evening. And while you lie here listening to stories about distant planets, out there, the universe continues moving in its own quiet way, silently, slowly, without needing attention. Metallic rain may still be falling on some burning world. Lava oceans may still glow red beneath skies that never fully darken. Rogue planets may still drift through infinite emptiness with no sun to orbit, and somewhere unimaginably far away, light from twin suns may still be falling across the surface of a world no human being has ever seen with their own eyes. When we think about all these things, we begin realizing something very strange. The universe is nothing like the simple image humanity once imagined. It is not tidy, not familiar, not built according to rules easily understood by human emotions, and perhaps that is precisely what makes it beautiful. Jung believed the human mind is always drawn toward mystery, not because we want to control it, but because deep down, the soul already knows reality is far larger than what we can see. Perhaps that is why whenever people look into the night sky, they often feel an emotion difficult to name. A little smallness, a little loneliness, but also a strange peace. Because beneath the vastness of the universe, we realize we do not need to carry the entire world on our shoulders. Planets continue orbiting without human worry. Stars continue burning for billions of years without witnesses. and life continues unfolding in ways we may never fully understand. Perhaps what heals people is not always finding every answer. Perhaps it is accepting that there will always be mysteries larger than ourselves. Jung called this the feeling of connection with something beyond the ego. When people stop seeing themselves as the center of everything, the mind begins softening. The small worries of the day grow lighter. The pressures, the disappointments, the unresolved things, all of them become slightly more distant beneath the sky of billions of worlds. Perhaps today was exhausting for you. Perhaps you had to try harder than anyone noticed. Perhaps there are still thoughts inside you that have not yet become words. But tonight, allow yourself to rest for a little while, because the universe never demanded perfection from human beings in order for them to deserve existence. A distorted planet can still be beautiful. A world trapped in darkness can still continue turning. A dying star can still create new planets from its ashes. And human beings are the same. Sometimes the broken places inside us are not signs of failure. Perhaps they are simply natural parts of becoming. Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." Perhaps that is also what stories about the universe quietly offer us. They help us look deeper into ourselves. When hearing about lonely rogue planets drifting through darkness, we remember the times we ourselves felt lost. When hearing about worlds that never know dawn, we remember periods in life when our own minds seem to contain no light. And when looking at chaotic planetary systems that still move according to mysterious rhythms, we begin understanding that perhaps our own lives are like that too. Not perfect, not completely stable, not easy to understand, yet still moving forward in their own way. Perhaps the most beautiful thing about the universe is not its size, but the humility it teaches. Every new discovery reminds us, reality is always larger than what we believe we know. And that is not frightening. It means life still contains wonder, because out there still exist countless undiscovered planets, oceans no one has seen, skies no one has named, stars burning silently in deep space. And tomorrow, the universe will continue existing exactly that way, vast, strange, and beautiful beyond human language. Perhaps that is what we need to remember before sleep, that not everything must be explained tonight. Not every sadness must disappear immediately. Not every question requires an answer. Sometimes peace simply means allowing ourselves to rest among mysteries we cannot fully understand yet, like sitting beneath the night sky and accepting that existence itself has always been mysterious. If this story helped your heart feel even slightly lighter after a long day, take a quiet moment to subscribe to the YouTube channel, Stories for Sleep, because here, we will continue exploring gentle stories about the universe, the human mind, and the quiet mysteries of existence, in the slowest and most peaceful way possible before sleep. And if you would like, leave a small comment about the planet that moved you most tonight. Perhaps the world where iron rain falls, perhaps the planet with two suns, or perhaps a lonely rogue planet wandering endlessly through darkness. Because sometimes what human beings truly seek is not only knowledge, but the feeling of quietly looking up at the sky together with someone else. And now, let your eyes close a little more slowly. Relax your shoulders, breathe in gently, and allow the final thoughts of today to dissolve like distant starlight. Out there, the planets are still turning, the stars are still burning, and the universe is still quietly expanding through endless darkness. It will still be there tomorrow, still vast, still strange, still beautiful. Wishing you a truly peaceful night. Sleep well.